Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I have my May reading wrap up. So, for the month of May, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I read 9 books. 2 were historical romance. 2 were contemporary romance. 1 was a fantasy romance. 3 were fantasy, and 1 was a graphic novel. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first book that I want to talk about is Lore Olympus. I talked about this in a lot of these books, some of these books. I went into detail in my weekly reading wrap-ups, recent reads. So if you want to go back a few weeks and see those, I'll just give you brief thoughts and feelings and star ratings. So Lore Olympus, if you don't know, is a very, very, very popular webtoon that has been since turned into these bind-ups, and this one is volume 4. I have been going back and completing my collection because I only had like the first 2 or 3. And I had read this before when it was on Webtoon. I mean, it's still on Webtoon, but I reread it because I just bought it and I loved it. I love Lore Olympus. It's a modern day Hades and Persephone retelling. It's very romantic. It's a little bit funny. It's a little bit dark at times, but I just love it so much. The relationship in here is 100% what powers me through. 5 stars. I just love it. I love it with my whole heart. So, okay, the next book that I read is One Kiss Alone by Nicole Van. This is a historical romance. I really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. So this book features Ethan, who is one of the brothers. In the previous book, we see the sister and another brother. So Ethan is a poet. He's sort of like very world famous, and he had some recent tragedy and heartbreak happen to him in the previous book, so he's kind of traveling until he feels better. So on his travels, he ends up in Italy in a carriage with this very, very beautiful woman that he is just so taken with. He just thinks that, like, he just feels this instant connection with her. Shortly after they are in the carriage, a highwayman comes and overtakes them, and Ethan thinks that he's going to be the hero in this moment, and so he has a gun in the waistband of his pants, and he is going to, like, put it on the highwayman guy. So he tells the heroine, you know, get behind me, I'm gonna protect you. And lo and behold, she takes the gun from his waistband and turns it on him, and she was in the whole thing with the highwayman. So that's the setup, and then there are also some different circumstances about how she's related to certain people that we've seen in previous books that come into play, and how they end up sort of in close proximity again and they fall in love. I did enjoy this one a lot. I think that this one is probably my least favorite in the series so far, but it's still like a really, really solid read. I really enjoyed it. But again, like, I just feel like I'm so done with these men who are just so completely bewitched by somebody's beauty. And even though I do feel like that was handled with a lot of nuance here, it was still like a major aspect of the plot, and I was just sort of like, here we go again, you know? So 4 stars, which is still a really high, really good rating. The whole series is on Kindle Unlimited, by the way. Okay, so now the next book that I read is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. This is an adult fantasy, and this is a book that I have not read anything even close to this. We have different perspectives. We have second person, first person, third person. The book is written with such beautiful prose, beautiful as in how the words go together, but it's also a very visceral reading experience. There are some very deliberate uses of words and phrasing in here that's intended to make you feel uncomfortable and to create this feeling in a way that I've never read before, so I feel like the prose in here is next level. The book opens when we have our main character sitting at his grandmother's knee, and she's telling him the stories of their ancestors, and you can sort of tell that their relationship is not exactly a warm and fuzzy one, that there are some complexities there to the grandmother specifically. And then as she's recounting the stories, we end up watching those stories on a play in this theater, and then eventually so that's in like third person, and then eventually we end up becoming the people who are in the play, and so there's the first person. And it's just a completely wild ride. Wild in the sense that I didn't really know where it was headed, but also in a way that, like, it's wild, but it's not the sort of thing that feels like a fever dream where everything in this book was just left up to chance. No, nothing in this book was left up to chance. Everything in here was very well thought out, was very well calculated and moved and played, and it was just fantastic. I think that this is a very, what's the word I'm looking for? This is a very challenging reading experience in a way that I feel like is so rare. Like, I can't think of very many authors who really trust their readers as much as this author does. Like, he does not hold your hand. He trusts you to understand and pick up what he's putting down, and I love that. So I gave this book 5 stars. This is definitely a favorite of the year. I thought it was phenomenal, phenomenal. Okay, so now the next book that I read is The Rage of Dragons. This is another adult fantasy, and this one I gave 4 stars, but I think it's probably more like a 3.5 star. It was fun, it was enjoyable, I was really engaged from the beginning. The basic premise of this is we have this world where it's just war all the time. It's nothing but war and fighting, and so there are women who have the possibility to call down a dragon and to sort of like have that as their power. For it's like 1 in every 1,000 or 2,000 women have that, and then 1 in every 100 men have the ability to call this big, like almost like a berserker power, just immense strength and everything like that. So that's the basic gist of the magic system. The dragons in here didn't play a huge role. We're mostly following our main character, who knows that he is fated to be a warrior and to battle, but what he really wants is just a very simple life, to marry the girl that he loves and have a family. But as some events happen, he realizes that he's never going to get that chance, and then the whole book ends up being this quest for his revenge. So I thought this was really, really fun. I think that the main drawbacks that I had about this is that it was largely action-based. Like, there are so many action scenes in here. I think because there were just so many action scenes in here, they really didn't allow for a lot of character growth and development, which is something that I'm always really looking for. I don't care about action scenes pretty much at all unless they really are contributing to the story or the characters. So I think that the reason this is a 4 and not a 3 is really because the narrator was fantastic and did an excellent job of elevating this reading experience. Like, the narrator was fantastic. So the narration aspect of this pushed it to a 4, but the story is a 3, sadly. Okay, and then I read My Season of Scandal by Julie Ann Long. This is the latest book in the Palace of Rogues. I love and adore this whole series. The whole series is so much freaking fun. But this book was also really fun. I gave it 5 stars. The premise of this one is our heroine needs to find a match. She needs to find a husband. And so her dad is a physician and her mother has passed away. And her dad sort of realizes that he is not going to be long for this world. And what he wants most is for his daughter to be taken care of, married to a good guy. And so he sends her to London to have a season, even though she's a little bit older than is typical. She goes with a chaperone who is really more interested in drinking and gambling and doesn't do a great job of watching her, and because of that and some other situations, she finds herself in a scandalous situation. But when she does have time at these balls, she ends up meeting our hero, who I believe is like 10 years older than her. I think he sits on the House of Lords. He's really interested in changing like policy, and he is really intent on pushing social to a good situation. And I liked that about him, and he is also a bit of a rake and sort of well known for that. But he is so completely enamored with her from the get-go. Like, he sees her and he wants her and he feels like and not just physically, right? Because that's not enough for me. He sees that there's something else about her. He feels this draw to her that he just can't quite explain. And it's just so beautiful watching them fall in love. This was one of my favorite books of the month. I loved it so much. This and The Spear Cuts Through Water were my favorites. This one was just such a fun reading experience. It was so romantic. It was so beautifully written. It had great banter, great found family. Like, I cannot recommend this series enough. I think it's fantastic. So if you're looking for a good historical romance series and you haven't read this one, you have to, because it's fantastic. So the next book I read is Broken Whispers by Neva Altaj. So this is a mafia romance, and I really liked this. This was very soft and sweet within the relationship, and I loved that very much. She is a ballerina. He is a broken, damaged, scarred hero. She chooses not to speak, and so there's a little bit of they kind of have to find other ways to communicate for a while. She has suffered some abuse, and he's also dealing with some things, but they're both, the thing that I really liked about this is they're both so willing to give this arranged marriage, which that's how they find themselves together, is there's an arranged marriage situation, as is common in mafia. The way that they were both like so willing to give that a try and to see the best in each other and to like love one another and try and move forward with that, not even love, but like to get along. They both feel this spark, this connection, but they're also both really willing to try and make this relationship work. And so that is a setup for some really beautiful relationship moments, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I gave it 4 stars. So Now, the next book that I read is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. So this is technically a standalone. It is part of his Cosmere universe, so you will see some characters pop up in here, and you will see some of these characters pop up in other books in the Cosmere. But this is basically about a kingdom where the magic system is governed by colors and by breath, and different people in different societies believe that breath means different things. Some people believe it's your soul, other people believe it's just the purpose for the magic, and we have this king who has two princesses, two daughters. One of them was raised her entire life believing that she was going to be sent to the God King to be his wife and to bear him a child. And the other one knew that that wasn't going to be her fate, and so she was sort of set on this path of, you know, I can kind of do whatever I want. When at the last minute, due to some political decisions the king makes, he decides to switch and send the other sister, so the one who didn't believe she was going to be sent to just be a broodmare, basically. And so she's the one who gets to go and meet the God King. And I really, honestly, I loved the characters in this. I think this is very, very character-driven, but I really loved the relationship with Ciri and the God King. I feel like there were some complexities there where he was not really very educated on what happens between men and women, and she definitely was. And so you have this little interesting dynamic there that you don't ever really see, certainly not in romance. And it wasn't a full-on romance, but there were romantic elements to it. And I just really loved the characters. I loved the pace of the story. I really liked seeing our heroines front and center in here. I loved that we have this talking sword. It was just fantastic. I thought it was really, really fun and just a good time. I gave it 5 stars. This is probably my new favorite Brandon Sanderson. I liked it a lot. Okay, and then I read The Curse of Saints. So this is a fantasy romance. This is by Kate Dramis. This book, I just happened to see this. I went to a romance bookstore on my birthday. I have video footage of that on Instagram as well. And I just saw this sitting on the shelf. I'd never seen it, never heard of it, and I was just like, oh, interesting. So I picked it up and I read it, and I feel like this is a pretty solid 3-star read. But I also feel a little conflicted about that because there are some things in here that I really, really liked, but there were also some things in here that were hard for me to get through and that I didn't like at all. So the premise of this is our heroine she's serving under the queen, and she is sort of like a spy. She's like her third in command, and there are warring kingdoms that are obviously striving to have power. And our heroine, she has a lot of power, but she doesn't use it very much. This also has like a pretty it's a little complicated, and it's also, this book has so much info dumping in it, but it never really felt like it was explained the source of their powers or how their powers work or really anything like that. While at the same time, it felt like there was just way too much info dumping in here. So I don't know. She has these powers and she is afraid to use them because she feels like something happened in her past where she killed someone and she doesn't want to do that ever again. She has dreams where she's killing people, or she can't control her power. It sort of overtakes her. And I think that is something that is very, very common in fantasy romance, but I also am like, I'm here for it. Like, I want to see if there's going to be anything new or fresh or what's going to happen with this. And I also just think it's fun. It's a fun concept. And the hero, the love interest, is the queen's first, and he is the one who she ends up falling in love with. And there's so much like political machinations that are happening in here that you never really know who is betraying who is a good guy, who is a bad guy. And I did like that a lot. But I will say that for probably like half of this book, at least half of this book, I was kind of super bored. I was really pushing myself to read it. I went away for a few days and I took this book, and so I had the opportunity to read it physically, because I think that if I hadn't like bought this on my birthday as a gift to myself, and if I hadn't had the book to read it physically, I would have DNF'd it. If I had just picked this up through Kindle Unlimited, I would have DNF'd it. There was way too much info dumping. Just non-stop info dumping and very little plot progression and hardly any character progression until we get to about 60% of the way through. Now that's quite far to be into a book, to actually feel like things are happening. I know these characters, I'm invested, right? But that last 40%, I was really into. I was really enjoying it. And the way it ended, it does make me want to pick up the next book. And so I do think I'm going to pick up the next book because I want to see how the romance is going to evolve. But I also feel like, at least in my mind, we've gotten rid of all of that info dumping. So now we can just move on in the story. But I feel like that is the most common problem that I have with fantasy romance, is the way they build their fantasy worlds. It's either not thought out well enough, and this one was thought out really well, or they don't know how to convey that information to the reader in a way that makes it readable. They just rely on info dumping, and I just hate it so much. So I was conflicted because by the time I finished this, I liked it and I wanted to read the next one, but there was just so much wrong with this for the first 50-ish%. So 3 stars. And then I read another favorite book of the month. It was King of Sloth by Anna Huang. Now, I love Anna Huang. I really, really do. I did not read an arc of this. You know, earlier this year, Anna Huang and her assistant came out and said, hey, we're going to redo the ARC team. You'll have to reapply to everybody who was on there. Because I was on her ARC team for years. I think I joined her ARC team in like 2021. And I've read and reviewed all of her books early, and I just love her. I love her so much. But, you know, I've been really bad about hitting my deadlines with arcs. So I just bowed out of that, and I just thought I'll just read it when it comes out. So I did, and I loved this book. I was really not sure when I started it if this was going to be it for me or not, because I don't love the type of hero that she sets him out to be. So Javier is basically... he's kind of a trust fund baby, kind of. His dad has this empire, this big financial empire he's going to inherit when his dad dies. So he's basically a rich boy who kind of just, you know, is a party boy, kind of screws around. He's very sunshiny and happy, and I just don't really love that type of hero. I'm so over these immature heroes who just don't really do anything. They just kind of screw around the whole time and use daddy's money, you know? Like, I have zero patience for that. But the heroine was interesting to me because she is grumpy, she's had her heart broken, she's very wary of people she doesn't really want to trust, and she is his publicist, or his family's publicist, basically. So she's trying to make sure that he doesn't, like, screw things up for the family. And until I was about halfway through, I thought this was a solid 4-star read, because it just wasn't hitting me the same as a lot of Anna's books do with the romance, where I feel like most of her books, to me, I feel like they're so romantic and I just really love them. Even if they just have pockets of scenes that are romantic, I'm just like, that sells the book for me. And then I got to this one scene, and I can't tell you because it's a spoiler, but that's the scene that pushed it to a 5-star, because it showed our hero being so thoughtful, so tuned into her, so caring, so loving, and I was just like, he knew that she was hurting, and he was just so supportive and just so there for her, and I just loved it. So that, and then a few scenes that came after, and the way this whole ended, I gave it 5 stars. I enjoyed myself so much with this. This book was a great read for me. It really made me want to pick up more contemporary romance. I loved it so much. I thought it was super fun, very engaging. I loved it. So 5 stars for this one. So there you have it. Those are the books that I read in June. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for making it this far. Let me know what you read in May. Wait, did I say June? That was my May wrap up. Let me know what you read in May, what your favorite book was, and if you've made it this far, please leave me a pink heart, and I'll see y'all in my next video.